This is New Rural Virginia, reclaiming rural leadership through conversation featuring real voices, real issues from the heart of the Commonwealth. Hey y'all, welcome back to New Rural Virginia's Candidate Spotlight Podcast. I am Parson Brown.
And I'm Larry Wohlers, and we are your podcast hosts. We represent New Rural Virginia, a nonprofit that focuses on the important issues that will affect the future of rural Virginia. So Parson, for the last 2 weeks, we've had a couple of amazing conversations with some great candidates for the Virginia Assembly.
Yeah, fantastic.
Joy Powers and HD 51 and Angela Chainer and HD 56. Really, they were two very different candidates in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that really struck me was this sense with them that they were ready to take the time to sit on that front porch with their neighbors, take the time in that rural county to listen to what the neighbors had to say and not just tell those neighbors what the policy should be, but have a conversation, right, about what they should be.
They've been listening not just on that proverbial front porch, but literally going to people's, and speaking with rural communities.
That's right. And I think people, can tell that difference, right? It's really important for us. And that's why we are so excited to speak with another candidate this week who is also, like them, very much someone who has spent his life dedicating it to public service.
Mm-hmm.
Jac Bennington in HD 61, which is much of Fauquier County and Rappahannock County. And such an interesting resume this guy has, right?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah, he grew up in Fauquier County, majored in religion in college, then joins the Army with a specialization in logistics. After that, becomes a high school teacher and has been teaching at Fauquier High School for 15 years. But in the meantime, joins the Virginia National Guard, called up to Afghanistan, later patrols the southern border as a helicopter pilot. I mean, wow.
Yeah, like seriously, he's not that old either, and he has crammed a lot of adventure into one life. Adventure and service, I should say.
That's right. Absolutely. So yes, Parson, really looking forward to this conversation. Jac, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
As you see, you've had a really busy and fulfilling life, done all sorts of things, and I know you've got a family too. So given all that, what led you to run for office?
When it was my senior year in college, I kind of thought to myself that life was going to be more service-oriented for me. I wanted to serve my God, my country, my state. And I served my God through being a youth director for just under 2 years at a church in Alexandria, Virginia. And then I served the country in the United States Army. And then I knew that I wanted to serve my state, and I was thinking about being a teacher. And so that was the other route that I chose. Plus, I wanted to serve in the Virginia Army National Guard. And so I had that kind of orientation towards service. But as far as the actual decision to run for office, it was after having 3 conversations with Delegate Weber. I teach U.S. government, and I invited him to talk to my students. And he's been kind enough to do that about 20 or so times. But I talked to him about one thing that was kind of important to me, which was about the possibility of eliminating the state income tax on National Guard servicemen's drill pay. So it'd be for most soldiers, probably about maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 bucks. Not a whole lot, but I thought it'd be a good gesture to make towards those men and women of the National Guard. And each time he kind of just said, yeah, it sounds good, but just always kind of just was kind of dismissive. And the last conversation I had with him after he was speaking to my students, he had said, yeah, I know, National Guard, I get it. And that was when I kind of started to think to myself, well, maybe this is something that I might want to try and look at. And then as I saw the community, as far as like the changes that occurred in the roads, the neighborhoods, the school, and just when I flew over the state in the National Guard, I began to realize that our representation in Richmond is not reflective of that. And that was when I decided that I was going to go ahead and then run for office.
Wow. I guess literally like the bird's eye view, that's gives you a different perspective. Tell us a little bit about your district. We had Angela Chainer and Joy Powers on our first 2 episodes, and their districts are deeply rural.
Yeah.
Yours is a little different. You're much closer to DC. You've got a slightly different atmosphere there. What makes it special, and who are your voters and your neighbors? Tell us about them, please.
We moved from Herndon, Virginia. My mother, father, and sister and I moved from Herndon, Virginia to Warrenton in 1990. And I have seen that area change significantly, with the exception of being gone for college as well as working in Alexandria in the Army. I've considered this to be my home. And that's why my wife and I moved back here in 2009 so I could start teaching from when we moved from Colorado. This district is kind of like the Goldilocks. It's just right? Meaning that you've got rural
Okay.
areas like Rappahannock
Right.
County, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
got
Yep.
what more cattle than you have people, and you have no traffic lights in Rappahannock County. You can see the stars at night,
Exactly.
and I
Yeah.
love being able to see the stars at night. And then as you go east on 211, you'll then start to see a little bit more of development as you get closer then to Warrenton, and then you have some areas that are much more suburban. And I think that the common theme about the 61st district is that it is a rural suburban area where everyone appreciates both, meaning the people in Rappahannock love to
Right.
have
Ah,
the amount of things that are available to you in Warrenton. I mean, I know
Sure.
it's not in a metropolis, but the convenience of Warrenton,
Sure.
but they also love to then have the escape of Rappahannock. And then the people
Yeah.
in Warrenton or Eastern Fauquier County, they love to have the convenience nearby, but they also like to be able to drive 30
Yeah.
minutes west and go look at the mountains. And so I think that the beauty about the 61st district is it has a little bit about everything for
Mhm.
everyone.
And so, as you talk to your neighbors, and I know it's pretty hot right now to do this, but you're able to get out and knock on doors, talk to people. What are you hearing from them? What are the issues that rise to the top, and you get a sense that as they look at elections in November, say those are the issues that they're going to base their votes on?
From what I have seen, it has been primarily schools. It's been um, funding of schools and everything associated with that. It's also been housing. People that are young want to be able to live in a place like Warrenton, and people that are older want their children to be able to move back if they so desire. And then also it's coming down to energy, and in particular,
Mm,
how do we
yeah.
balance the needs of um, energy demands that we have for a variety of reasons, whether it's um, data centers or any other forms of
yeah.
demands on energy. But those are the big three.
And that's something that has been coming up in conversations and in both of our previous episodes, but also just as we talk to folks around the district. Energy prices are a huge issue here. We've got Dominion plans to raise rates by a lot in the coming years, and this enormous issue of data centers that everyone is swirling around trying to grasp. What should your voters be thinking about, and how can you deliver a message to them?
What I think people need to be aware of is that energy is an issue now, and it will be a big issue in the next couple of years in Virginia. The proliferance of data centers in Northern Virginia, in particular Loudoun County. I'm not anti-data center completely because,
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, we use our phone for so many things. AI is something that is extremely important and it's emerging. And I think that's going to be something
Yeah.
that's going to take over as far as prevalence, as far as online searches and issues and things like that.
Right.
But the thing that I think voters need to be aware of is that Dominion, Appalachian Power, but just use Dominion. Dominion is a monopoly utility company. Whenever you purchase a home, you use whatever utility company you've got. You don't get to choose which one you
Nope.
want. We're with Rappahannock
Right.
Electric Cooperative. And so that's just what we've got. And you don't really have an option to choose from that. Dominion has done a few things. The first thing that I think people need to be aware of is that they overcharged customers about $1.2 billion, according to Southern
That's right.
Environmental Law Center. That's a
Yeah.
massive amount of money. And the State
Hmm.
Corporation Commission recommended that Dominion refund only 372 million, but they actually only refunded 330 million. So what we
Yeah.
ended up getting as far as ratepayers was a very, very small percentage on that refund. So the question is,
Yeah.
what do they do with that money? I don't know. But what they can do with that money, and this is something that I think voters need to be aware of, is they can take that money and give unlimited amounts to political candidates
Yeah.
or office holders. I mean, they're not doing anything illegal. It's state law. But I mean, if you just look at my opponent, Mike Weber, and I'm not trying to vilify him because he hasn't done anything illegal or anything like that, but he has accepted over the course of his time in office, as of July 29th, $285,500. Back in April, he got a check from Dominion for $90,000. Now, I kind of look at it as a compliment because maybe they looked at me as a candidate that was possibly going to challenge him, and so they wanted to give him some money. And when I've spoken to him about this when he's talked to my students, because I bring up campaign finance and I bring up him as well as Russ at Perry so that students can see, how much money races cost. And when I talked to him about it, I said, you've gotten some big checks from Dominion Energy. And his response has frequently been, well, yeah, but I've also voted in ways that have gone against what they've wanted. Now, that may be true, but has it really been that significant of a vote? Because if it wasn't, then they would probably stop writing him checks. So I think,
Yeah. Mhm.
and so what I think needs to be aware, as far as like voters need to be aware of, is that when you have an issue that's going to come down between constituents and Dominion, how
Right.
will Delegate Weber side? Is he going to be looking out for his constituents' interests, or is he going to be influenced by the $285,500 and end up siding with Dominion? And I think that's something that voters need to be aware of. The utility companies can have enormous influence over our legislative branch.
I know I've read that given the huge increase in the number of data centers in our area, that Dominion is planning to spend $100 billion on new energy, plants, etc.
Mhm.
And to pay for that, they're going to have to raise the rates that you and I pay, right?
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I mean, again, like I said, I'm not anti-data center, but right now, the way it's set up, to me, it's like data centers are more parasitic in that they are taking our
Hmm.
energy, and then who's paying for that? It's the ratepayers. In order to keep them cool, they're using water. Just to do about 30 AI searches, you're looking at using a half liter of water to cool that. That's just 30 of them. Imagine how many AI searches go on every day. And so I think that what we need to have is we need to establish a way for data centers to not be parasitic in nature, but we need to have a symbiotic relationship where they're going to
Okay.
be a little bit more, they're going to carry their weight. In other words, they're going to be able to have the water to keep them cool. They're going to be able to have more self-sufficiency with energy, and so that they will be able to take care of the needs as opposed to the ratepayers. Like I said, I'm not anti-data center, but we've got to change the way that we are establishing them because I think what we're doing is we're getting a little bit too far in front of ourselves, and
Right.
we are going to have to pay the piper at some point in time, and I don't want that pain to be too great.
Yeah, so it's like you're saying that, this is what I've been hearing also, that the cost for data centers is more than fiscal. It's
Yeah.
Right.
what is the true cost for our environment, our economies, and way of life.
Yes, and
Exactly.
ultimately, what it needs to come down to whether or not there's a data center are the people that are going to be living near it.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are going to have to deal with that. It's easy for me to say, yeah, let's put them up, let's put them up, or whatever the case may be. But I don't want them right outside my door. So
Right.
that's that delicate balance that we've got to find.
And what I think I hear you saying is that it would be easier for you to make decisions that favor your neighbors if you aren't taking money from one of the major players in this.
Exactly. I have not accepted money from Dominion Energy, nor will I accept money from Dominion Energy. That is one thing I will not do because I want to be able to make decisions that are keeping my constituents' concerns at the forefront.
Right.
Copy that.
Public schools. You mentioned that schools are really important to people you're talking to, and you're a teacher,
Yeah.
so you have a bird's eye view of what schools need and also the perhaps the impact of the very polarizing debate we've been having recently about public schools.
Yeah.
So what's your sense? What's your take on our public schools?
I teach this when I talk about the government and such. If you look at the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, I believe it was, they talk about the importance of public education and stressing public education in 1787. So they
Yeah.
obviously saw the value of that. And I talk to students about that and that the value of public education, because I believe, and I think I'm not saying anything new or profound, but public education, I think, is the single greatest investment that we can make in our country. The learning that occurs, that's going to prepare children to then become adults, plus also the extracurriculars as far as like the socialization, team sports, things like that, where students learn about themselves and learn about how to interact with others. And then they take that experience with them for the rest of their life. If you think about like what the GI Bill, I think that's one of another examples of the government investing in education. The GI Bill back in 1944 laid the foundation for massive, massive improvements in American society. And so what I think that we need to do at the public school level is that we need to fund schools to give students the best education that they can possibly get. That's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing is that we need to also pay teachers. And I know I'm kind of maybe advocating in conflict of interest because I'm a teacher, but I think that what we need to do is we need to pay teachers so that the individuals who start in the profession stay in the profession. Because so often I've seen talented individuals who have gotten into education and they really enjoy it. They really love that job. What happens is they start to realize, hey, you know what? I need to be able to pay off my student loans. I want to possibly start a family, whatever the case may be. And they realize I'm not going to make that much money in this profession. And especially the positions that are science or math based, where they could possibly do something else in a different field, they end up then leaving. We end up losing out on some quality teachers. The third thing, and it's more of the home life, but home, you got to stress that. People at home have to stress education. I mean, I think that's you get those three things. You get those three things in place, where you got the funding, you've got for improvement of schools, you've got the pay of teachers, plus you then have the stress of education at the house. I mean, like as far as being important, that's going to create success across the board. And I know that some people kind of sometimes look at education and funding for it. You know, maybe let's say it's an individual who's, let's say, 60. Right now, he or she can probably do some improvements on their home. They can probably work on their car. Their health is still pretty good. And some of them may be saying, well, I really don't want to pay extra in taxes, or I don't want to worry about the funding because my kids are grown. And that's very likely. Think about this. In 10 years, what is that 60-year-old going to be facing? Well, he or she may not be able to work on their house as easily as they once could. They may not be able to work on their car as easily as they once could. Their health may start to decline.
Yeah.
And so then 10 years from now, individuals who graduated from high school are going to be 28, and they're going to be those HVAC technicians. They're going to be those mechanics. They're going to be those nurses and doctors. They're going to be the lawyers. They're going to help them with maybe their wills or whatever it may be. And so I think that the stressing of education is something that we all need to be willing to endure, and making sure that our kids are set up for success in the future.
One of the questions or the arguments you often hear now is everyone agrees we need education, we need to pay for it. But some on the right, well, many on the right will say we need what they call school choice. We need to be able to take that taxpayer money and put it somewhere else, in a private school somewhere. And on others say, well, it's actually school's choice, because unlike public schools, those private schools don't have to receive you. They can say, you don't fit with our vision of things, so we won't accept you. But what's your take on school choice?
I am all in favor. If you want to send your kid to a private school, go right ahead. Just be willing to pay the tuition. But as far as tax dollars, public tax dollars, that's for public schools, and that's where it should stay. Like you'd said, the school choice, the school chooses who's going to go there. I may not, for whatever reason, get that acceptance because of anything. The school decides that they don't need people like me; they need somebody else. What I think we need to do is still focus on taking tax dollars and funding our public schools. And I understand that some schools may not be doing too well. And so what you do is you then fix them. I mean, we can fix them and we should fix them because
Right.
that's something that every kid deserves. They deserve to
Yeah.
It's a
have,
valuable investment.
yeah,
Yeah.
they deserve
It's
to
our
have that.
children, our future. And like you were saying, like all those folks that will be not just providing services and running businesses in the next 10 to 15 years, but
Mm.
also those are going to be your neighbors. I'll just be crass. Like you don't want to end up with a bunch of dummies being your neighbors either.
Right. I want to have a well-educated individual working on my car, working on my HVAC.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
important.
That's right. Okay.
Another important thing, obviously, is healthcare. You're that borderland between rural and more urban.
Mm.
Are your neighbors aware of and concerned about the cuts that have been made in Washington, and how are they aware of how that's going to impact them?
I do not think they are. And I think that what people need to be aware of is that there is pain coming our way, and it's coming our way at the end of 2026, I believe. That's when a lot of those cuts to Medicaid are going to take effect. And it was done pretty smart the way they did it because people aren't experiencing those cuts now. They're going to experience it later. I know some people may say, well, this is removing people from Medicaid. I'm not on Medicaid. This isn't going to affect me.
Right.
And it is. And I'll use the example with me and my wife and our first son. He was born in, I think, he was born in August of 20, I think I know. He was born in August of 2014. And I think the bill came out to $10,255.11. That
Yeah.
was what our bill came out to. And I remember looking at the breakdown of it, and 800 milligrams of ibuprofen cost $16.80. And so then I was looking at this and I thought to myself, that is a massive amount of money, but it makes perfect sense as to why. Because if people are cut off of Medicaid, they don't have that health insurance, what they're going to do is they're going to wait until the last minute to go see a medical provider, and it's going to be the hospital. The hospital can't refuse services. So what are they going to do? They're going to then take on the uninsured, but they're not going to eat that bill because it's a business, and I get it. They've got to remain in business. So what are they
Right.
going to do? They're going to then elevate the cost of their healthcare.
For
And then
everybody else.
that's going to then go on to the people who are covered in insurance. And then the insurance companies, what are they going to do? Well, they're not going to eat that. So then they're going to raise the premiums. And so it's going to reflect on everyone who's got health insurance. And so Medicaid, cutting Medicaid, one, I think it's mean, but second, it is something that's going to impact everybody, and that's something that I think
Yeah.
that we need to make people aware of, especially in the lead up to this election, because the question that people need to be asking themselves is who is going to push back on that DC based pain that's coming our way from the big beautiful bill.
Exactly.
Is it going to be a Democratic majority General Assembly? I think so, and that's what they need to be focused on. And I think that's why need to be made aware of healthcare and how it's going to impact everybody.
You also talked when you said when you talked to your neighbors that housing affordability was something else that people are worrying about, and I get that there aren't really any easy solutions here because you're in a district where that's changing. You're getting more and more people coming in from the outside, from Northern Virginia. They're looking for their starter homes. You have your own young people looking for homes, and you have your long-standing residents trying to keep their taxes down, for example. So what is your take on the affordability and the availability question? And what can the state legislature do to help people out?
Let's talk about the cost of housing. When my
Yeah.
wife and I moved from Colorado Springs to Warrenton, I knew it was going to be expensive, but I didn't know it was going to be that expensive. We could not afford a home. We sold our house in Colorado, got a little bit of a profit, not much, because that was when the housing market was still really, really in the tanks and it was kind of recovering. But we were able to get an apartment to rent. And eventually what we did was we found a house, but we found one out in Front Royal. And so what we had to do is what a lot of people have
That's
to
where I
do is
live.
exactly. And a beautiful area. We loved it. We loved living there, but it was 41 miles from Front Royal
Yeah.
to where I taught. And so it was 82 miles a
Okay, yeah.
day. And so that was
Yes.
one that was one thing where it was just like, oh man, I loved having the house, loved being there, but it was a commute that I just did not look forward to.
Most people in Warren County would totally understand that.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens too in Warrenton is that people live in Warrenton, but they work in Fairfax.
Yes.
And it's
Mhm.
because of the fact of housing. Homes are expensive. In fact, I was looking at some things a while back, and National Association of Realtors back in 1995 said the median home price in Virginia after adjusting for inflation is $227,826. Then I was thinking, okay, well, how much was, what was the median salary in Virginia in 95? And then the census came back with when I looked that up. And after adjusting for inflation, it was $75,936. So that means
Mm,
that the average or the median salary in Virginia, household income in Virginia,
right.
was one third of the cost of the median home price. So then I was
Right.
looking at current numbers, right? And so then in 2025, Redfin said that the median home price in Virginia is $485,700. And then in 2025, as of June, USA Facts and Fox News came back with when I did a search, came back and said that the average, or correction, the median household income is $90,974. That's
Wow.
18%
Okay.
of $485,700. So what you've got is a very, very different situation from 1995. Because a lot of people have said, well, I bought my house 20 years ago. I saved up and everybody else should do the same. And that was when things were different. That was
Yep.
when the price of homes were not nearly as far out of reach from the household income. And so that's why things are really different. And so what can be done? Well, to try to lower the price without causing seismic shifts in the supply and demand, what could be done is relaxing of zoning laws in the form of additional dwelling units. Now, I'm not talking about taking your home and then making it into an industrial complex or anything like that, but just allowing individuals to create an additional dwelling unit so that their mother-in-law or father-in-law can live there with them on their property. So what that does is it frees up an apartment or it frees up a home for a first-time buyer or for a renter to be able to purchase or to rent. There are other things. I talked to a realtor and she was telling me a couple of days ago that she had a house as a townhouse in Warrenton that was going for, I think, for 395. And she said that's a very decent price. But she said she had a hard time finding qualified buyers because so many of the people that were trying to purchase the house when they were going through their credit check, they had student loans that they were paying
Oh,
off.
yes.
And
Yep.
she said, and that was eating into their debt to
Yep.
income ratio. And she said, I understand
Uh,
that that's, still numbers are numbers and money
Yep.
is money. But she said, that's not a person that's being careless and is
That's right.
$30,000, $40,000 in debt on something that's not going to pay off like an investment, like student loans. And she
Right.
said, we need to find ways to try to maybe relax those so that people can then get into that first home. Because I
Right.
think what you're going to have is the more prices go up, the longer it
Yep.
will be until people can purchase their first home. And so instead of buying it when you're 28, you're buying it when you're 38. So when you're
Hmm.
paying off that mortgage, you're 68 years of age instead of 58. And right when you're getting ready to retire, you have not built up that much equity to then use as your nest egg for when you then possibly downsize into another home.
Yeah.
And again, there's no, like you just said, there's no magic bullet. There's no simple solution. I mean, this is a complex problem, and
Right.
complex problems aren't solved with simple solutions.
Hmm.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And there's a lot of folks in my generation where I feel like sometimes there's almost like a bit of shaming, almost like it's like if you don't own a certain caliber of home by your such and such of an age, that we experience sometimes, and it shouldn't be like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I think that's it's come from I think that the people that are a little bit older, that are about my age, that look at individuals that are in their late 20s and 30s, and they're saying, "You still live at home? Why do you? Well, I didn't live at home when I was that age." And again, it
Uh-huh.
goes back to that things were different back then. We didn't have such a huge average price of a home, and the incomes were more substantial. And I work with teachers who are still living with their parents because of that problem where they're paying off student loans and they're also trying to save what money they can save to either get a down payment on one or to start renting on their own. And it's a struggle for a lot of individuals. It's a struggle.
Uh-huh.
But I think that what we need to do is just be smart about it, and we need to make it our focus. That's the thing. I mean, there's not going to be a simple solution where we just come in, the General Assembly comes in, like let's fix it like that. It's just got to be something that we need to work at and make it the focus so that we can make housing more affordable and that people can then have that stability in their life.
We live in an era right now where our state and local elections have become somewhat nationalized, right? People are reading the national news and then they are voting on their state elections pretty much based upon their views of are they Republican or are they a Democrat? And of course, you're in a district that's been pretty reliably Republican for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you explain to them why it's important not to just vote the party line, but take a look at you and your values? Why does this make a difference for them in this election?
Well, if you look at me as far as a candidate, at one point in time, I considered myself to be a moderate Republican. And then 2014, Dave Bratt beat Eric Cantor in the primary. And Eric Cantor was at times a little bit too conservative for me, but I always kind of looked at him as someone who was an institutionalist, right? He
Yeah,
was a grown up kind of person. And then I started to
Uh-huh.
see the way the party kind of went in a different direction. And my values changed after my son was born in 14. In particular, what it was Eric Cantor, or correction, Dave Bratt was talking to, I think it was Chris Matthews in an interview. Actually, he was going on MSNBC, and he was asked about minimum wage, and he said, "I'm a free market guy," and I understand the concept behind that. But I'm giving my son a bottle. He was about a month or two old, and as I'm giving him that bottle, I hear him say, "I'm a free market guy," and I thought to myself, what if my son comes home, this is, 16 years later, my son comes home and says, "Hey, Dad, I got a job." One of the questions I'm going to ask is, well, how much are you getting paid? Now, imagine if he then said, well, it depends upon the market. And right now, my boss said that it's going to be, about $3 an hour, $4 an hour. Well, he's being taken advantage of. And not
right.
everybody has
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
and not everybody has that self-advocacy. I sometimes don't have self-advocacy, and I'm running for office.
Yeah.
So we all don't have that self-advocacy at times. And I just realized that was kind of where I started to change. And I started to develop a little bit more of democratic ideology or principles. And then as the party began to make a shift, it was not the party that I recognized anymore.
Right.
And so I think that people need to be aware of is that it's just because you voted Republican all your life, or just because your parents have voted Republican all their lives and you have as well, doesn't mean you have to do that now.
Right.
The Republic, you don't owe the Republican Party anything,
Right.
is what I would tell some people. But I think also what people need to understand is that the state government has a bigger role in your life than the federal government. If you think about when your
Yeah.
child wakes
Yeah.
up, why does your child wake up? Your child wakes up because they got to go to school. Well, who oversees schools? The state government. You drive your child to school. Well, what roads did you drive on? Well, unless it was 66 or 81, it's a state road. The
That's
speed
right.
limit, that's a state law. The compulsory education, that's a state law. The taxes that you pay for those roads are largely coming from the state government. And so the state plays a much bigger role than people often think of. And I think that what we also have to be aware of too is, again, going back to that DC based pain in 26, is that it's coming. And the,
Yes.
the people of the 61st district in the state of Virginia in this election have to ask themselves, who do I want to help push back against that?
Yeah.
Who is going to do that? And then make that decision.
I just want to appreciate that statement. You said it was self-advocacy and looking through the lens of being a father that kind of led you to literally crossing an aisle. And I think that there's a purple area that we can all sort of be familiar with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think yes, you are right. There's a lot that we
Yes.
can agree on.
That's right. But people need someone who they know will go in to Richmond and represent them and not a party and not an ideology, but what their real needs are.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And that's why I'm running.
That's right. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that you were able to take this time with us today, and look forward to hearing more
Thank you for
from
having
you
me.
as
Oh,
the
thank
summer
you.
year goes on. Yeah.
Love to come back. Thank you. And if people want to learn more about me, they can go to my website. It's benningtonforvirginia.com. That's spelled BENNINGTONFOR, and then Virginia's spelled out.com. Bennington for Virginia is also Instagram and Facebook as well.
We'll be sure to share that.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be sure to share that. And just for our listeners, Jac has done some great reels on Instagram talking about issues. I really enjoyed that.
Check those out.
So
There'll be more coming.
out and check out the website. There's a lot of good information on there.
Thank you very much for having me on, Parson and Larry. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you and good luck.
Appreciate it.
New Rural Virginia Candidate Spotlight is a production of New Rural Virginia. Visit newruralva.org for more. Produced and co-hosted by Larry Wohlers and yours truly, Parson Brown. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.